Chapter 3. Dobro Turtlebane. Set upon by a terrible tree monster, Aiden's courage failed him completely. He went cross-eyed with panic as the crouching beast got closer. When it was only one stride away, it raised up its hind legs and stood upright over him. Just when Aiden was sure he would faint from sheer terror, the wind shifted and the creature's astonishing smell hit him like a wave. It was a fishy, slippery smell, sharpened by the pungent odor of wild onions and rancid berries. It was a horrible, eye-watering smell, and it revived Aiden from his swoon like a whiff of smelling salts. Aiden's vision began to clear. He could see that despite the scaly skin and long tail, the monster's form and movements were almost human. Beneath that terrifying bony crown, the creature's face, for all its wild ferocity, was almost boy-like. Aiden shook the last of the cobwebs from his head. The monster was a boy! He was unlike any boy Aiden had ever seen, but he was a boy nevertheless. He didn't have a many pointed skull. That was a helmet made from the shell of a snapping turtle. He wore a tunic made from a whole alligator hide that explained the scales in the tail. The tunic was cinched at the waist with a cottonmouth snake, held fast with its own fangs rather than a belt buckle. From his waist dangled a side pouch fashioned from the wedge-shaped head of an alligator garfish. Aiden rose to his feet. The wild boy was a head shorter than Aiden, and skinnier too. Not puny, but a wiry, tough sort of skinny. His skin was a grayish brown, though Aiden couldn't tell if his skin was actually that color or only coated with river mud. The boy's face was pinched and fierce. His eyes stared wild and unblinking beneath a single long eyebrow. Aiden had never seen such a person, but he thought he knew what he was. He was one of the Fiji folk. Aiden's grandfather had told him many tales of this wild, nomadic tribe that traveled up and down Cornwall's many rivers and swamps. Equally comfortable in the water or in tree tops, Fiji folk were rarely seen by civilizers, as they called the Cornwalders. According to Aiden's grandfather, Fichis had an uncanny, almost magical ability to disappear into the forest or under the water anytime settlers were nearby. He had described their fierce, warlike spirit, but also their unquenchable jollity. Then again, grandfather had often invented wild tales to entertain his grandchildren. The house servants often threatened to throw Aiden to the Fiji folk when he misbehaved. But he had always assumed the Fiji folk were imaginary creatures, like leprechauns or boogeymen. Yet here before him stood what appeared to be an actual Fiji boy. Aiden had no idea what this wild boy might do next. He was fierce, no question about it, but not exactly threatening. On the other hand, he didn't appear to be friendly either. He was just wild. There was no other way to describe him. The two boys regarded one another. At last, the wild boy's nasally voice broke the silence. Are we going to tangle or not? Aiden stood flabbergasted. It had never occurred to him that this wild child of the river's bottoms might speak a recognizable language. The Fiji boy placed his hands on his hips and leaned in closer. You heard me, young civilizer. Let's tangle. Aiden blinked twice, not quite sure he understood. To tangle? Do you mean fight? You want to fight? Sure, I reckon, answered the river boy, bending into a slight crouch and raising his fists in front of him. For the first time, a little smile flickered on his muddy face. Aiden swallowed hard. He wasn't feeling quite as wild and as adventurous as he had a little while earlier. Why would we want to fight? The river boy straightened up and cocked his head. He seemed genuinely perplexed. You want a reason? For fighting? Hmm, I reckon I could think of something. He scratched his head with one hand, counted on his fingers with the other, and after a short pause looked up again. All right, here goes. But I ain't had a chance to polish it up yet, so don't laugh. He hummed a little to get his pitch, then sang to the same march tune Aidan had sung a few minutes earlier. The bro of the Tam I am, and I could whup you easy. I'll make you weep, 'cause you smell like sheep, and your looks are kinda greasy. The verse was not up to Aiden's standards, of course, but the bro of the Tam seemed proud of it. See, he said, you not the only rhyme maker on this river. A self-satisfied smile showed several greenish teeth, as well as 3 gaps where greenish teeth should have been. Aiden thought he caught a glimpse of the Fiji good humor his grandfather had told him about. The river boy was smiling. That was a good sign, wasn't it? Perhaps he could escape without getting torn limb from limb. On the surface, DeBro's song was a challenge and an insult, but for some reason it had put Aiden at ease. It was a funny song, made funnier by DeBro's ridiculous gap-toothed grin. Being a poet himself, Aiden appreciated the wild boy's effort, and considering it was the spur of the moment, it wasn't all that bad. Good work, Aiden laughed. He was starting to like this fellow in spite of his boorish behavior. But I'm surprised you'd make fun of my looks. You look like you were fished up from the river mud, and I may smell like sheep, but you smell like a well, you smell like you brush your teeth with mashed garlic. You smell like you use rotten catfish for a pillow. Aiden was only warming up. You smell like you slick your hair with eel slime. Aiden had meant for his remarks to be friendly ribbing, the way a boy might make fun of a friend's new haircut or his new too clean tunic. He had no way of knowing he had just completed the ceremonial rude swap that usually precedes a Fiji fight. If there had been a slim hope of DeBro leaving without a fight, that hope just got slimmer. The wild boy creased his brow into the fiercest scowl he could manage and pulled down the corners of his mouth until his bottom lip poked out farther than his nose. His pointed ears showed red, even through the mud, and he began to hop circles around Aiden, his knuckly fists flying in the wild gyrations around his head. You done it now. The bro's turtlebane's gone bust your flapper. He bobbed and dodged and darted. Raise them turkey wings to the defensive posture. Come on, put 'em up. I won't strike a man who ain't defending himself. Despite his slight build, DeBro Turtlebane did cut a fearsome figure. What he lacked in size, he more than made up for in enthusiasm. He seemed fully capable of whipping a man twice his size, and yet, in spite of the looming danger, Aiden was still more amused than frightened. He chuckled at this river wasp, who continued to buzz around him, impatient for Aiden to assume a fighting stance. Now come on, barked DeBro. Let's get this here tussle started. Aiden stood his ground but didn't raise his fist. There's not going to be any tussle. If you're mad at me for throwing rocks at you, I'm sorry. I thought you were somebody else. And besides, he added, rubbing the knot on his head, you got the better of that deal already. You seem decent enough. I'd rather make friends than fight. You kind to say so, answered DeBro, who continued to weave and dance. I like you too, but that's got nothing to do with it. Stop changing the subject and let's proceed to the fisticuffs. Aiden was not at all sure how he was going to get out of this mess. The Fiji boy seemed determined to fight him with or without a good reason. I've got no cause, he said, and besides, he added in a quieter tone, for now he got closer to the heart of the matter, I'm not much of a fighter. At this, DeBrose stood still. He stared in disbelief, his shoulders slightly slumped. Hold on, he began. I know you a tough one. You said so yourself. No, I didn't, said Aiden indignantly. He was convinced that the river boy was picking a fight on false premises. Sure you did, the wild boy answered. You said you weren't afraid of beasts or strangers and you fight for the kingdom with a bow and an arrow. Aiden gasped perplexedly at Dubrow. Now don't go denying it, said the river boy impatiently. You stood right there on that stump for me and all creation to see, and you said you was young and your arm was strong and you'd like to fight. It dawned on Aiden that Dubrow was talking about the song he had sung while still under the emboldening influence of the bark of the Bog Owl. But that was just a song. It was make believe. I've never even been in a real fight. Dubrow whistled. His fierceness was mostly gone now, and there was a touch of pity in his voice. Well, maybe we could have just a short little fight. I won't disfigure you very much. No, I don't want to fight. Aiden's adventurous spirit had ebbed away, and he felt the burn of embarrassment on his cheeks. Well, if you've never tried it, answered Dubrow, trying to sound like he was the sensible one. How can you say you don't want to? Aiden turned and walked toward the middle of the pasture. I need to tend to my sheep. Dubrow hopped to catch up with him. Maybe we could just box. No. Want to wrestle? You've got the wrong person. I'm just a shepherd boy. Climb your tree and leave me alone. Aiden continued stalking off toward his sheep, but he was stopped by a wailing cry behind him. Ah, ha, ha, ha! Ah, ha, ha, ha! He turned around and saw Dubrow drop to his knees, his face contorted into a sobbing grimace. He rushed to the wild boy's side. What happened? Are you snake bit? Did you twist your ankle? Ah! Are you hurt? What's the matter? Dubrow continued to howl. His attempts to answer were choked out by loud sobs. Finally he spoke. Ever since my brother's gone downriver, I got nobody to fight with. He broke off and sniffed loud and long. It's just so lonesome. You're trying to pick a fight because you're lonesome? Dubrow nodded his head. I need a friend, that's all. That's how you make friends? You got any better ideas? Well, I seen you chucking rocks with that slinger and cutting and jobbing with that whacker stick. I heard you singing that song about fighting and carrying on, and I said to myself, Dubrow, there's a civilizer with some spirit and gumption. We got all the same hobbies. So I clumb down to introduce myself and make friends. Dubrow looked like he was about to start crying again, but he managed to go on. And you make me feel lower than a mud turtle. Mom's right about your kind of people. What's my kind of people? Asked Aiden. Civilizers. I'm not supposed to go near a civilizer. Mama said you folks'll civilize us all to sorrow and misery. If she finds out about this, I'm in the deep mud. Dubrow turned back toward the forest. You're probably right. It's time for me to go back up the tree. Aiden felt rotten for having rejected Dubrow's friendly gestures, even if they were the most unusual offer of friendship he had ever received. He didn't want to see the Fiji boy go. As Dubrow reached the beech tree, Aiden spoke up. Before you leave, can I ask you one thing? I reckon so. Do you want to wrestle?